so I'm just going to introduce myself because I want to get... You guys are such an easy-to-please audience. Can I just leave now? I want to get you out of here on time, well, as much on time as I can. As a pronunciation, my name is Aish. So Aish works in and around technology projects. She won some award a few years ago, but the important thing is she loves figuring out how diverse teams work at their best. So now I'm going to switch to first person. If you haven't already, there's a QR code up on here for you to scan. It basically gives you access to the slides and the closed captions on your device. Emotes as well, a little bit like Microsoft Teams, and I'm going to want a lot of that because I need validation, and this is nice for me. But it also means that at the end of the session, you'll have an opportunity to give me feedback. It's completely anonymous, and it comes straight into my inbox at the very end of the session, and I would really love to hear from you. So for people in person and online, hopefully you can see this QR code. It'll be on the next slide as well. Hi, Mum and Dad. They're on the YouTube Live. Kaya, Wanju, Nana Quarrel, Aish. Hello and welcome. My name is Aish. How lucky are we to live and work on Wajak Noongar Boodja? It's incredible that we get to be here in face-to-face in a conference after such a long time, and all the wonderful conversations that we've had today, right in the heart of Perth and Buruloo. And I just want to express my gratitude to all the tradition custodians of this beautiful land for continuing to share their culture and their traditions with us. Thank you all if your logo is up on here as well. Without you and your support as sponsors, we would not be here today. Thanks for giving emerging speakers like me an opportunity to get the hang of this thing. Let's get into the shit show. Now, I know you all voted for the swear word in the title, but thanks anyway. While you get comfortable with PowerPoint Live, let me tell you a little bit about me. That's myself and Donna Boyd up here last year talking about product ownership. It was our first ever conference talk, and I'm clearly a glutton for punishment, so I'm back at it. I am an idealist. I never really outgrew that naive little girl who wants to adopt all the dogs in the shelter, save the whales, end world hunger, join the United Nations. But I did realize that the best way for me to make change is to focus in on the things that I'm good at, the things that I like doing, the things the world needs, and things I can get paid for. And that is focusing in on that intersection between business, technology, and social impact. It's because of that I'm incredibly passionate about diversity and inclusion. I mean, how can I not be? But it's about leveraging diversity and inclusion to enable and support sustainable, high-performing teams. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. To err is human, to learn, divine. Hindsight's always 20/20. If only we had that in 2020. It's really difficult to take a moment to pause and reflect on difficult times, particularly when you're right in the middle of it. Now, I had a lot of really great ideas on how to actually run this session. You know, I had this vision that I was live facilitating and you were like screaming your frustrations out at me and some of the worst projects that you've ever been a part of. But I wasn't sure that I'd be able to get you angry and then calm again in 20 minutes so you don't go outside picking fights with people. But also, you're here to listen and to learn, not to work. So I had that session with smaller groups of people who already had a high level of psychological safety. And these are the 4 things that we came up with, the 4 top challenges that we're going to unpack today, one by one. It's not my job. Get your remotes, hands up, eye rolls, groans if you've heard this before. Well, if it's not your job, whose job is it then? If you're hearing this in your retros or in your projects towards the end of a reporting cycle or whatever it might be, it basically means that there have been assumptions that have gone wrong, that have been proven to be wrong. Someone has assumed that this isn't part of their role, and you have assumed that it is. You cannot assume that people understand what their role is. You cannot assume that people's interpretation of their role is the same as yours. This is especially true for multi-vendor teams and teams where you have a mix of operational, project, and product people. We each have a different lens that we bring into what our role actually means and what it means to work and how they interact with each other. And it's incredibly important that we actually bring ourselves together to get that common understanding, that common clarity on how we'll work together today. What you need to do is, first steps, do we all actually agree on what our problem is? Do we understand what we're trying to solve? Why are we even here in the first place? When you have a clarity around that, then you can do your visioning. What's that desired outcome? Where are we heading to? What do we want to be in 3, 6 months, years' time? What are we trying to get to? From there, you have to understand what are the things that you actually need to do. Forget your project methodology for a moment, but what do you actually need to get done? What's your value chain that's going to get you to where you want to go? When you have that value chain understood and broken down as much as you possibly can to get your best estimates, from here you can have a look around and talk about the kind of project methodology you think is going to suit your project the best. What roles are available to you? And then you can agree and assign those roles and responsibilities. What's within your remit today? Now, you might be talking to me and might be thinking in your head, we've done this, and there's still things that come up that we don't know who it belongs to. Or maybe you're thinking about, well, the product that we're working on doesn't actually have a very clearly defined outcome. Well, it's true, we don't have a crystal ball, and we don't know always what's going to come up and potentially derail us on our journey to our end vision or our end goal. This is where you come together as a team and you actually talk about the roles that are available to you and your team. What are your experiences in previous projects and previous organizations? How have you worked with a project sponsor previously? What do you expect your tester to do? Are there some roles, or some responsibilities, I should say, that your change manager would traditionally be responsible for? But in this particular project, it makes more sense for your BA to do that. What's within your remit today? What's the social contract that you're forming? Someone clearly did not think it was their role to clear the path before painting, and I don't think it led to a remarkable outcome. In a game of he said, she said, you're going to want to keep your receipts. I don't care how or when, just make sure that you do. Number 2, we don't do things that way. Have you heard this before? You've come in new to the team and you've tried to introduce a new way of working. Sorry, mate, you must be a bit new here. We don't really do things that way. Things have been working fine until you came along. There's not enough angry emojis in there, but I love it. It can be pretty tricky to balance chaos and order, particularly when you're trying to manage the different people's expectations and their different comfort levels, along with the type of project methodology that's going to suit the organization that you're delivering to, what your customers are comfortable with, what your team's personalities are, and so on and so forth. Often you'll find people gravitating towards process and procedures in more governance-heavy and regulation-heavy environments, or when people are particularly uncomfortable with chaos. As consultants, we're often asked to bring a best practice approach to executing work, and it's fantastic for us to be able to lean on our experiences on what's worked really well before at other similar companies or other similar sized projects. But the thing about software development is the sheer number of variables means that, well, there's no real silver bullet to delivering an outcome. And there's so many things that you need to consider when deciding on what's the best approach and technique that you can take. What are the project funding cycles, and how does your team report to them? What kind of legal and regulatory bodies do you sit under? There's so much that you have to consider here. There's another talk about best fit and best practice that I think happened earlier today. I would love to catch that online, and I highly recommend that you do too if you weren't able to get to it, because there are so many different ways to organize yourselves and execute work. And someone might organize themselves in a different way to you. I am talking about both the opportunities when you're trying to introduce a new step in a process, or when you're actually trying to take something out. I can't count the number of times that someone's come to me with an idea to potentially, or to my team, let's organize the backlog a little bit differently. or let's add a little bit more structure to sprint planning. And it's always been met with resistance to change. And that's the key thing about this particular topic. As humans, we are naturally resistant to change. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of not being able to learn something from scratch or not performing well enough while you are learning. But in this particular instance as well, there could be some level of insecurity about, why isn't the way that we've been working good enough? What's wrong with it? We've gotten here all this way so far. Change only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And the best thing to do in this scenario is to do something with and through someone rather than to them. Bring your folks together and actually have that frank discussion about what are the gaps that you're seeing? What are the blockers and the bottlenecks that you want to address? Chances are others are potentially feeling it too, but maybe they're too nervous to speak up, or maybe they're too focused on the doing to be able to pause and reflect on how they're doing. When you have people collaborating together on the solution, you're actually empowering people to have ownership of the changes that you're trying to get them to adapt to. Ask the question, though, is this actually going to help or hinder us? This extra step that we're going to put in before we make a decision, is that going to lead to better decisions? Are there other ways that we can get the same outcome, even if it's not from a playbook or a Scrum guide? The main thing to remember, though, is to experiment. Give people a refund policy. Give them a bit of a way out, basically. Test the waters, give something a red-hot go before coming together as a team to evaluate, is this actually working for us? Maybe it's uncovered something else that we'd rather focus on. Building a culture of experimentation into your team early on makes it so much easier for you to add incremental change into the way that your team works more often, because people are going to be comfortable and familiar that change is only going to stick when it's actually working for you. But experimentation also allows you and your team to scale as your product matures. We didn't get anything done. We didn't finish our sprints because they just kept changing their minds. We can't seem to get anything right here. Yeah. If you're hearing this, let's talk about it. Scope creep, changing requirements, acrobatic backflipping clients, it's a circus out there. The Agile Manifesto was essentially born out of many of the challenges that we've discussed today. But this is my favorite way of explaining why socializing your product early and often is the best way to avoid surprises. You've probably experienced this where your BA or your product owner or your customer themselves have spoken to you about this is what we want, build it, you've gone and done the thing, showed it to them. Nah. The thing about changing requirements is, though, or changing your mind, like everything in moderation. Like I said before, we don't have a crystal ball, and we don't expect everyone's going to get everything right the first time. This is why feedback loops are so important early and often to make sure that you'll be able to catch this sooner rather than later and be able to have that conversation and go on the journey with your client. We want to create sustainable solutions and happy customers, and regular feedback is the best way to do that. There's no sound, but that's the caption. At the end of the day, you can spend all the time in the world understanding your customer, spending time with them, showcasing your product regularly and early. You can understand their preferences and their style, and still they might keep changing their minds. There could be a few underlying reasons for this that they might not be upfront about with you. Maybe there's some funding issues that they're not at liberty to discuss with you. Or maybe they're just not the right people to actually make a decision at the end of it. There's still a few things, if you feel like you have the ability to influence, that you can still do here. Help them build empathy for what it costs you to deal with their change of mind. Set your boundaries firmly but gently, but explain why. Bring them on the journey with you, and don't assume that they know what it costs you. There's one of my favorite things to do is the power of contrast. I love presenting one good option that I want them to choose, and then another option that's technically feasible, but otherwise potentially not quite suitable. It's much easier to be able to see and poke holes in something when you can actually see it. Presenting multiple options is also a fantastic way to demonstrate the evolution of a product vision and the ideas that all of you have had, whether it be from a user's point of view or from a technical feasibility point of view. I've definitely been in scenarios when we've been on a bit of a journey on what that product should be doing, and we've got customers who tend to sort of revert to thinking that they had maybe 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Why can't we do it that way again? I can't remember. Everyone's got a lot going on. There's probably lots of projects that they're all spread out on. But presenting multiple options and being able to see that contrast can vividly show and demonstrate the difference between where we are now, where we started from, and clearly explaining why. What is the evolution of our thought process here? Don't forget to reinforce any further benefits of the current state of what you've built, and let them know about ongoing support and feedback opportunities as well. Anything you can do to ease a little bit of that fear of commitment. Easier said than done for most, but if you don't respect your own time and your own sanity, other people won't either. Finally, it's retro time. You're talking about what you want to keep doing, stop doing, start doing, and your team are all voting on how well the sprint went. You're getting 4s and 5s out of 5. But maybe you didn't actually finish your stories. Maybe some blockers weren't escalated, and dependencies on other teams were left really, really late. Now, I am specifically talking about those sprints where things weren't in tip-top shape, but your team are quite close-knit and feeling a bit self-congratulatory, or maybe they're ignoring the elephants in the room, or maybe they're actually voting more on how each of you as individuals dealt with the challenges that your team faced, rather than how the sprint actually went. Retrospectives are an opportunity to come together as a team and evaluate how people, process, and tools are coming together to help you and your team deliver. It's not about airing dirty laundry, and we're not asking for people to come out and point fingers and start fights or anything like that. It is about balance, and if you have a team that seems to be unwilling to speak about the real issues that are impacting delivery, it could be a sign that they're lacking psychological safety. You don't need Harvard Business Review to tell you that psychological safety is the cornerstone of high-performing and multidisciplinary teams that I'm sure each of us work in, day out. But it also means that cognitive diversity of thought, is better leveraged when people are comfortable with each other and familiar with alternative points of view. Building psychological safety in your team is hard work. It takes time and energy, but it is well worth it. You can start by encouraging your team to understand themselves, assess themselves, think about how they like to think, work, and behave. Doing this helps you uncover any cognitive biases that you might have that could potentially be contributing to the problem or the culture that you might have, that you're trying to tackle. Understanding how you like to respond to change or how you respond to conflict can almost give you a moment to basically decide how you're going to respond to some stimulus. But simple things like taking an interest in people's lives and actively soliciting questions from them, giving them multiple channels to give feedback and to communicate, depending on their personality types. These are things that you can do no matter your position on the team, formal leadership or not. And if you do have a culture of fear that's stopping people from sharing ideas, the moment that somebody actually does, you need to be ready with a positive response. If you are in a formal leadership team, it is critical, though, that you are clear and precise with your expectations, because this is how you build trust and build reliability within your team. If you make mistakes, own up to them. If there are changes, explain them. Be more human, be divine, be vulnerable. You cannot underestimate the influence that you have on team dynamics, no matter your position on the team. Culture is top-down, but the individual behaviors basically explain to ourselves and to each other what we're willing to accept from our colleagues and from ourselves. And people are always responsive to purposeful and courageous vulnerability. At the end of the day, retrospectives are about getting a team that's so focused on the next big thing, the next sprint, to actually pause and reflect on what's just been. They're a great way to introduce incremental change, but sometimes complex problems can come up as well. Complex problems are often the sign of a team that that's letting something fester because they don't feel comfortable talking about it until eventually it explodes. Every single framework to organize people works. Capitalism, communism, the free market, a donut economy. That is until people get involved. The things that make us different make things so complicated. But the things that make us different can make us even stronger if it's harnessed appropriately. Each of us are a product of our experiences. We've all experienced life and work so differently, and we bring that into every single interaction that we ever have. The way we respond to change, the way we set boundaries or don't, the way we respond to conflict, each of these can be a challenge turned into an opportunity if we just take a little bit of time out of our days to pause and reflect on what's just been, who we are now, and where we want to go. And if we do this together as a team, we can make sure that our teams are humming. Thanks, DDD, sponsors, committee, all of you for coming along to my talk. I really appreciate it. Big shout out to Journey One's Agile and product community as well for being my guinea pigs and my brains trust. Please connect with me. Let's have a chat if you agree or disagree about anything. I would love to hear from you and the feedback on your devices as well. That's all, folks. Look at your curtsy. Cool. I mean, I don't think we have time for questions, but I'll take them. I don't mind. I got nowhere to be.
Questions now?
I'm happy to.
Anyone? Hands up.
Anyone? Bueller?
See with the camera, I'm not going to scare you.
It's going to shoot you.
Hello. Oh, that's low. You talked a lot about setting boundaries, and I think a lot of us have experience with dealing with some quite difficult stakeholders. Do you have any, I guess, general tips on how people can approach conversations, I guess, around setting boundaries?
Righto. Look, when you're dealing with difficult stakeholders, sometimes the best thing to do is to shield yourself and your team as much as possible from them. But sometimes, we're in a position where we are the shield, and that's going to be tricky. And there's a lot of things that you'll have to balance: your own mental health, your own capacity and capability to deal with conflict in that scenario. We are all human, and you cannot be expected to deal with hostile circumstances day in, day out. There's a lot of things that you can do to mentally prepare yourself for a difficult conversation. Doing whatever works for you, for mindfulness, for taking a walk, clearing your mind, preparing what you're going to say, coming in with notes, even bringing someone as a support person in with you. Those are the kind of things that I would do before knowing that I'm about to have a difficult conversation with someone. And also, don't forget to expect that no matter what happens, the word's not going to crash. You're not going to die. Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is, maybe you just don't like each other after a while. That's okay. You're going to be fine. You're going to survive whatever 30-minute conversation you've got in your calendar. You still have the rest of the day to look forward to.
I think you make a really good point about having someone who can advocate for you and having that person alongside you early. Lived experience of exactly this issue. And knowing that you're allowed to take a breath. I was at a pitch night at the museum. I don't know if anyone else was there, the innovation night too. And our host talked about his stutter, and he said, you might see me do this, and I might behave in this way, and that's because of this. And he opened the conversation for anyone else to share what's going on for them. So advocating for each other and actually knowing that we're all human and we all make mistakes and we can all actually just collaborate.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Nope. Wonderful.
I know half the people in this room, so it's fine. Thanks.